Hello there. If you're a new player trying to figure out how you want to build a team or what units to focus on, or how, trying to plan out or whatever we're getting summoned for, here's a quick guide on building a team. So these are the notable non-mythics. So while you're playing the game, these are the units that you can help to really help you push content. Or if you're trying to do infinites or whatever, or Christmas or Halloween, these are the units that you should look forward. Now these top 5 at the top, these are units that are um, you might use for the entire game, as there's 2 money units, the 2 buffers, and Sakura. These units that don't really get replaced. The only one here that you can actually use an alternative for is Lifa instead of Wenda. With these supports, I would recommend especially using either Pain or Black Hair, I think his name is, just because these abilities usually people don't use these abilities, so there's a small chance of you having to fight with someone else for that supportive ability. Next up is team building really matters on what you're doing. So you need a different team for Infinite than you do Christmas, than you do Infinite Mansion, obviously, or Story. So here's a generic team that I'm using right now, and I'm just trying to use this to point out what this team does. So I have a heal unit, I have Usopp, which can get rid of everything, I have Azushi, which is a bleed unit that also does damage, Jokujo, which has a supportive ability, and then 2 money units. Here's some examples of movement manipulation, the main one being slows. But here are all the different kinds. Then we have the other kinds of supports. Bleed can be a support sometimes, as regeneration can really mess you up, especially in Christmas. I bring bleeds because of their supportive ability, even if I don't have the most damage on them. But then there's also Griffith, 100% global buff, but there can only be one of them. And the regular buffers, which can buff units up to 100%, and then debuffers, which make them take more damage by a certain type of damage. So magic, physical, bleed, and then also magic. There's 4 money units in the game. Oshi, some people count more as a buffer, but since she helps you with your economy management, then I also put her here. Golden only works on Bulma and Speedwagon, and that's why you usually only see them. Also, Nami gives you about as much money as Speedwagon, but is also more expensive, but she also does damage, so, but not a good amount of damage, so, eh. Hills and hybrids. Now, this is the only important damage type for anything that really isn't like endgame content, because you need something that can hit airs early on. So usually that's hills, but there are some units that are hybrid on place, such as Usopp, which is in like a tier of his own, but also Hinami. Then there's other DPS types. This is more important when you're trying to evaluate what your team does in Infinite. So sometimes your team is there, or a unit is in there just because he does big damage. A great example of this is, um, you know, Saber. Sorry, I was playing there for a second. Then there's hybrids. These are the units that do a lot of damage, but they also can hit everything. So this is Vegito. This is Gilgamesh. You know, insert whatever unit you're using. Even Hills can be here. Then there's full AoE. These are units that can hit everything, but obviously they lose to like armored units, or maybe they're not as good as killing bosses specifically. Then there's sub DPSs. This is less. This doesn't mean that they do less damage than your main DPS. This just means that they do more than a regular DPS would. So there's boss killers. These are guys that either have long cooldowns or have passives that make them really good at killing one unit. So like Aizen and Pucci with their 6-minute cooldown abilities or whatever they are. Then there's the traditional kind, which is just DPS that do good damage, enough to classify them as DPS, not just like a regular support. But um, you mostly bring them because they do more than just damage. Then there's the role players. These are guys you kind of need to build your team around. Usopp's a little bit of an exception because he can kind of go on anything, but Gas, Gyutaru, and Stain, you kind of need certain teams for them. So for story, you usually want a team that's, like a hill hybrid, a money unit, ideally a support unit, usually a cheap slow. And then 2 other units. Sometimes you want a cheap DPS too. Usually it feels like a lot of people just use their hill as their main DPS and hill because it just hits everything. But usually once you get later on, or once you build a team for like Legend Stage or something, you might want another DPS. Infinite Castle and Legend stages. Now, Infinite Castle, you kind of just need a large amount of characters to choose from once you get past level 100. But in Legend stages, you could really focus on supports and Usops if you're having a hard time doing good damage and if you don't have any like evolved mythics yet. So just, making sure that other people who have better damage units can just use their damage units is pretty helpful. And then for limited time events, um, a team that I would recommend is a bleed, a support. Ideally, not a slow support, but you can use supports that slow if that's the best you have. A full AoE. I think a full AoE is really what you want to have, as you want to be able to hit all of the ads that have a lot of HP. A hill to make sure that there's no early flying units. It could also be an Usopp here, by the way. Money and money. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or if you want any help with your teams, let me know.